Good afternoon, everyone, and
Good afternoon, Prof.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for
It is a pleasure.
accepting to join today.
okay. Good afternoon, Prof. Good afternoon, everyone.
So, Ada, I guess we should start immediately.
Yes, I want to know, am I being heard?
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, Prof. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of the Mentors Chair. Today, our mentor is no other person than the current past president of CIArb Global. And before we go into reading his profile and starting the meeting, I would like to introduce the host of the meeting, Ms. Abisoye Fatahusi, who is the YMG chair in Nigeria. Welcome. Thank you so much.
I think we lost our speaker, if I'm not mistaken. I can't.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, our
Good
distinguished
afternoon.
speaker, Professor Dr. Mohamed Abdel Wahab. It's a
Hello.
great honor. Good afternoon, everyone, the young practitioners, our senior members, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, Nigerian branch, our chairman, Mrs. Adebomire. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a very great pleasure, honor, and pleasure on behalf of the young members group to welcome you all to this maiden edition of the Mentors Chair. It's an exclusive and unfiltered interview and discussion with our speaker today. This initiative is designed to create a unique platform for the young practitioners so that we can have genuine, candid conversation with the leading figures in arbitration and dispute resolution. It's an opportunity to go beyond the titles, the accolade, and the achievements and learn about the journey, the challenges, the lessons, the failure, the successes and choices that shape the professional excellence. We are truly privileged today to commence this initiative with our very own Professor Dr. Mohamed Abdel Wahab, who is a globally respected arbitrator, a scholar and leader whose contribution to international arbitration continue to inspire practitioners across the world. Professor, we're very delighted to have you in our mentors chair, and we look forward to an honest, insightful, and engaging conversation that will provide mostly for our young members with practical lessons and inspiration as they navigate their own professional journey. To our young practitioners and participants, I encourage you all to listen, engage, and ask the questions that matters. The wisdom shared today may very well influence someone's career, your perspectives, or professional journey. And this maiden edition of Mentors Share is therefore not simply the beginning of a program, it's the beginning of a conversation between generations, experience, and ambition. And on behalf of the YMG Nigeria, I sincerely thank Professor for honoring our invitation and thanks everyone for joining. Before I hand over to the moderator, I'd like to invite our very own branch chair, Mrs. Olushola Adebomire, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Abisoye. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to be at this another wonderful program being hosted by the YMG. It's been such a wonderful work in arbitration with the YMG in the last 1 year. Thank you very much. This new program, this new idea, the Mentors Chair, I hope this just goes on and on and on. I want to start by thanking you and your team. I know it takes more than one to put all this together. So I want to thank you and your team for putting this amazing program together. I don't know how you did it, but Prof, I know that Prof is not an easy target or an easy speaker to get. He's not at all. But I also believe that Prof has a passion for young people, a passion for arbitration in Africa, and a passion to see that arbitration truly grows in Africa. So I believe that that is why Prof has given up this time, for the young members group. I personally want to say, Prof, thank you very much. I know he's highly, highly sought after, not just in Africa, but all over the world. And so to give you this time is amazing. I really pray that everyone will take advantage, like Bisoye has said, of all what we're going to hear. I am going to listen. I mean, Bisoye, I attend all your programs, and this one, I'm not going to miss any minute of it. There's so much to learn from a person like Professor Abdel Wahab, and I just encourage everybody, make sure you're not just listening. Get a book, get your pen, write down notes. These are notes that you're not going to get from a course. These are lifetime nuggets. So get a pen. If you don't have one, if you're just sitting in front of your phone or wherever, make sure you get a book, you get a pen, write things down. You're going to come back to these things and you're going to say, thank God I wrote them down. I look forward to learning a lot myself because there's always something new to learn about. I mean, these days we're talking about AI. Very soon we're talking about emotional intelligence in arbitration. People like Professor Wahab, they've seen a lot of things. I wouldn't say they've seen it all completely, but they've almost seen it all. And Prof, like Bisoye said, please don't hold back. The young ones are our next generation. They are the ones who are going to take over in the ADR space, not just in Africa, but globally. So everything that they hear today is just going to push them another step forward on the global stage. Once again, thank you, Bisoye, and your team for putting this together. Thank you, Prof, for agreeing to do this. And to everybody who is attending, like I said, get out your pen, get out your paper, remove every distraction from around you. This is something you're going to thank CIArb for many, many years to come. Once again, Bisoye and team, thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for honoring our professor and our first mentor on our men. Start asking Professor, all the hard questions. Professor Dr. Mohamed Abdel Wahab is the Professor of International Arbitration. He's a private international law and English contract law, and is Director of the English section at the Faculty of Law, Cairo University. He is the founding partner and Haitian Construction and Energy Group's Zulfikar and Partners Law Firm, which is resided in Egypt. He is the international judge of the Bahrain International Commercial Court. He is the global past president of the CIArb. He's the dean of the African Arbitration Academy. He's a member of the Curatorium of the Hague Academy of International Law. He's the member of the governing body of ICCA. He's the chair of the ICC governing body for dispute resolution services and member of the Inclusive Global Legal Innovation Platform on online dispute resolution. He served as arbitrator, legal expert, and counsel in more than 290 cases, including complex, high-level, institutional, and ad hoc arbitral proceedings involving parties from Africa, from Asia, from Canada, Europe, the Middle East, and the United States and Latin America. In 2026, our professor received the GAR award for the Best Prepared and Responsive Arbitrator. And in 2018, he received the ASA Prize for Global Advocacy in International Arbitration. In 2025, he was selected for the Law Power List at the Law Legal Leadership Excellence. It's a cocktail reception that was held during the Paris Arbitration Week in 2025 at the Ritz Paris. In 2024, he received the Law's Recognition of Legal Excellence Award. And in 2022, he was voted as the most influential legal academic and received the Law's Award Professor. our very dear Professor Dr. Abdel Wahab was nominated 5 times for the Global Arbitration Review Award for the Best Arbitration Lecture Speech. Now, this is just a tip of the iceberg of who we have as the privilege of being in the mentors chair. So, Professor, we are going straight up to the questions, and I'm sure that you're ready to answer all our questions. So let's start. Let's look at the past and the present and see how it goes. My first question to you would be, if you could sit across the table from the younger version of yourself on the day you decided to pursue arbitration, what would you tell that person?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm very grateful for the turnout and for the invitation. It's a privilege, and thanks to Madam Chair for her kind words and for you for the very kind introduction. I'm here to answer all the questions to the extent I can and be very candid. Now, if I'm talking to my young self many, many years ago, and I'm reflecting on that, um, I would say the very same thing I said to myself at the beginning, although there were no guaranteed results. I would say, you can make it, you will do well. I will just add, just don't be in a hurry to arrive.
Okay. So that's a very, very interesting thing to tell yourself. Okay, so why I'm saying this is because our generation or generation of young arbitrators, we've noticed, something about us where we are very, we want everything fast. We want to be quick about the familiarity. We want to be quick about the position. We want to be quick about the fame. So hearing don't be in a hurry to arrive seems like a very contradictory statement for us, because that's all we want right now. We want to actually be in a hurry to get to where our elders are. So how do you juxtapose the reality of where the young arbitrators are, and with this advice of don't be in a hurry to arrive? So how can we balance it while trying to make our place in the arbitration space?
Absolutely. And I recognize that. That's why I say that, because I think for the younger generation, because of the pace of life, because of everything around us, time has become not only of the essence, but patience is becoming less and less a virtue. And that's why I think it's a very useful reminder. Let me tell you this. You cannot build a building that sustains the test of time unless you start with a solid base. And that is why I say, patience is relevance. You need to work hard, work with speed and efficiency on yourself, on your skills, everything. But also you need to have a solid base, because that solid base will actually live with you. You can always change the upper floors. You can always work around, redecorate. But if the foundations are not good, that's the big issue. And that's why I say taking time to build a solid foundation is the recipe and the shortest cut to success.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. So I want you to understand that in this meeting we have both young arbitrators and older arbitrators. So my questions will be a mix. So this meeting or this webinar is basically mentors chair, it's titled mentors chair. So one of the questions that is a non-starter would be for young practitioners. What do you expect them to bring to a mentoring relationship? Because as you've said, for us to actually have patience, but building the solid foundation we would always require mentors. So what do you as a mentor, as a senior, what do you expect a young practitioner to bring to that kind of relationship?
Four things, in all honesty: curiosity, passion, discipline, and readiness to learn. This is my, what I say, commandments to that. And it's, I think, a great, great recipe. If these four things are brought to the table by a mentee, they're extremely helpful. Again, curiosity, passion, discipline, and readiness to learn. One further point, in any mentoring relationship, and I know it's very difficult to resist, because the first thing that comes to mind with any mentor, at least someone of an international stature, is opportunity and the need to open doors. But my suggestion is the best thing you can ask from mentors is to help you to become the person whom people open the doors for, rather than you asking the door to be open. How can I get the advice that makes me that person that people want to open doors for me, rather than me asking for these doors to be opened?
Okay, so that's a very great takeaway. Becoming the person that the people themselves want to open the doors for, and not just requesting, that the doors be open for you. I think that would make us segue into the next question, which is what are the biggest mistakes you see young arbitrators make once they receive their first appointment? You have already talked about, people wanting to open, or the mentors opening doors for us because we've been able to bring to the table the 4 things that are required. So what are the biggest mistakes young arbitrators make once they receive their first appointment, once doors have started opening for them? What are the mistakes that you see in your line of mentoring?
Well, trying too hard to show expertise or experience, I think that is visible. And there is sometimes a degree of vanity, which I would warn against and caution against, definitely. Remember that the first appointment is not an evidence that you have literally mastered arbitration. It is the profession leading you to its trust. So that's the first thing for the first time. So handle that trust with care. And I think the valuable lesson is, don't take things for granted. Invest a lot in building trust and in making people see that you have become extremely useful, helpful, reliable on the first occasion, that it becomes difficult to ignore you for a second opportunity.
Oh, okay, very interesting, sir. So don't take things for granted, because most of the times the way we are wired as young ones is that at the first instance, always show yourself, show up and show out, let everybody see that I've gotten this and I can do all things. But this advice is really, it really takes us a step back to know really what is it that mentors are looking for, or what is expected when we have our first appointment. So my next question would be, for older arbitrators, or for experienced arbitrators, I think that's the best way to put it, what are the most common weaknesses you see in experienced arbitrators? Because I know they always expect some kind of things from the young ones. So, but for the experienced arbitrators, what are the most common weaknesses you see?
I will say that, and I think that will show how candid I am. Look, I mean, experience is certainly one sees and appreciated as time goes by. Um, and sometimes experience can create the very dangers that it's intended to cure. And here are the weaknesses that I see. The first thing is what I call intellectual ossification, which is rigidity. Basically, it is not uncommon when we're deliberating and we're saying a case, senior members would say, "Oh, I've seen that before. This is how I've always done it." And I think that creates a big problem, because now you are in a situation where experience is creating a dogma rather than a proper, not clouded judgment. The second one, apart from intellectual ossification, is what I say overconfidence. After, after tens, hundreds of cases, one begins unconsciously to classify and categorize, to feel, oh, you know, nothing they will say is going to change my mind. So you jump to conclusions too quickly. And that is a big, big challenge. One constantly reminds himself, and I'm talking about myself, that it's always something new in every case. You've always to consider that counsel may bring something new to the table, something worthy of consideration, reflection, and even reflecting on past decisions, past views. Because every case deserves at least the professional courtesy of being understood before it is categorized and judged. And the third weakness, I say, is insufficient preparation disguised in confidence and experience. Um, there is no seniority exemption from reading and studying the record. One can rely on their expertise, on their experience, but this cannot be a substitute to studying the record. So insufficient preparation, disguised in experience, is another weakness. And perhaps the final one, which explains maybe the three others, then that's the fourth weakness, is losing curiosity and perhaps passion. Because once you lose that curiosity and passion, monotony reigns, lack of interest becomes normative, and that is a very, very serious weakness.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So, I think one of the last point you made is actually very, very important. Losing curiosity and passion. So, I'm wondering, how does that play out? Because you are for CIArb, maybe your name is on a roll. For your name to continue being in that role, you have to pay your fees and all that. So that payment of fees and joining activities in the institution shows ab initio, shows that you are curious, or you have a passion for arbitration. So how do you juxtapose losing curiosity and passion with the fact that someone is actually making steps or taking steps to ensure that they are recognized as arbitrators, and that they can be called upon at any time to be an arbitrator?
So I make a distinction between financial obligations to any organization you are part of and curiosity and passion. Because let me say this, people may have the curiosity and the passion, that they may not have the financial means for a sustainable period in the future. But to me, let's say paying fees to an organization that you're part of shows two things: shows commitment and seriousness of purpose. If you chose that organization to be part of it, you have, one, the right to contribute to it making better. Two, you have the duty to continue to pay the dues that you have consented to by joining the organization, because that also shows commitment and seriousness of purpose. But I make that distinction from curiosity and passion, because they can exist even if people are not, let's say, part of any organization or whatever. Now, of course, that will drive them as part of the passion to act on that passion, to act on the basis that you want to be better by joining organizations that train you, help you build and hone your skills. And so as part of that commitment, one is expected to rise to the occasion and pay the dues.
Okay, great. Very great distinction. So before we enter the institutional part of, the questions on the institutional part, I would like to, okay, well, those that are already on the call or those that have sent questions, one of the questions we've also gotten is the question on specialization, whether it's is it better to specialize in arbitration early, or you become a general commercial lawyer, and then after a while, then you create your niche in arbitration? So what do you advise, or what do you suggest is the better way, rather specializing early, or having a deep foundational knowledge on the general purposes of law before you specialize?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. Let me tell you this. As Africans, we're mostly destined to make a choice between two things, and sometimes it's a false choice. And I resist these false choices in time. Now, if you ask many people from an elder generation, or in the good old times, should I specialize early in arbitration? The answer from their perspective is no. You need to practice law, build a solid foundation in law first, before you specialize in arbitration. Now, I can tell you openly, candidly, and clearly, absolutely not. If you want to do that, specialize in arbitration early on. Because the specialization today in arbitration is not just to specialize in arbitration generally. There are subcategories that you need to specialize in: construction, energy, renewables, finance, banking, telecommunications, whatever, investment, commercial. There are many categorizations that one need to take into consideration. And I say that early specialization in arbitration is useful if you want to build a career, and that's building on the expedited route that many people want to take. But I will say this: invest in every case you work on, because what will make you stand out? Many people who work on cases with a legal background will only concern themselves with the legal part, studying the facts, and that's it. My advice to you, you want to stand out? Arbitration is a multidisciplinary system. You need specifically to understand the business relationship, that have technical knowledge of the specific issue and learn from it. And that will help you effectively with this multidisciplinary approach and understanding to life, to many areas beyond law, physics, chemistry, biology, everything that will contribute to you becoming a better arbitrator and a knowledgeable person. And I would say this, become a brilliant specialist and a reasonably good generalist. That is the recipe, I think, to success. But invest time in understanding things that people don't even bother having any interest in understanding, the technical and business aspects of the dispute. That will undoubtedly help build your career in arbitration and beyond.
Thank you, Professor. So the answer is very interesting because for maybe not necessarily Africa, but even for Nigeria, we find out that for young ones, there are really not a lot of cases that that are specific to arbitration. In that, before arbitration comes up, there are specific things that needs to happen before you go into arbitration, and most of the times that's not the case in some issues. So saying that, as a young person coming out and maybe you have an interest in arbitration, you should just go ahead and specialize in it. We will now be thinking of the financial aspect, where what can I do while I'm specializing in arbitration? What can I do to ensure that ends meet, to ensure that I'm able to take care of myself while I'm specializing in arbitration. So I like the way you put it, be a great specialist and then a general jurist. But I'm also concerned with us that are young lawyers, how that would work in reality for us. Because at the end of the day, we would have to be able to do a whole lot of things to be able to make ends meet. So,
Let me answer that. No,
yes,
that's
sir.
very valid. So in Africa and Egypt is not that different. People will tell you. Now, first, your question was, is it better for me to specialize in arbitration early or to become a strong commercial lawyer in the beginning? Now, for me,
Yes.
when you ask the question, presenting both options means that both options are viable. So I have the ability to do that, and I have the ability not to do that. But now you're saying, well, the scarcity of situation is on the ground in Africa, and as I mentioned, Egypt not that different from Nigeria. The reality is there aren't many opportunities to specialize early on. And so I need to prioritize by finding a place to work as a lawyer, build on that, and perhaps even move on to arbitration later on. Now, if you don't have the option and the luxury to make the choice, then my answer is absolutely yes. One cannot just stay idle and not to take a standing by becoming a lawyer just because I'm staying and waiting for the proper opportunity to arise. You need to create your own opportunities. And let me tell you, when we started and when I started, but that of course different decades, arbitration was not a specific specialization that has spawned its own culture and existence as a standalone area of practice, distinct either from litigation or even sometimes from corporate disputes generally or corporate law. And so people who have done that were generalists who do arbitration on the side, in addition to litigation, whatever, if a case comes across. What I've taken, well, was incumbent then on me, say, this is an area I want to specialize in. And so I believed in the idea and building it and they will come. So I started distinguishing myself as a dispute resolution practitioner. So the surgeon that you go to when an operation is needed. Now, people will tell you, oh, but that's not a very lucrative thing. Well, in the beginning, yes, because people, okay, you're waiting for an opportunity, but you're effectively honing your skills, building, advocating for that, showcasing your excellence through work. And you became gradually known for the person, the go-to when a dispute arises in that sense. And so gradually one case landed the other. and a practice was built squarely within the field of arbitration, and we separated litigation from arbitration, and we had a separate department. So it is a development process. If you have the option today, and in Nigeria, there are people today who specialize in arbitration. If you have an opportunity within one of those firms and you get that opportunity, then absolutely yes, early on do that and invest, as I mentioned, into this multidisciplinary system. If you don't, then work as a generalist lawyer, but keep your interest, your learning, your training, capacity building in the field of arbitration, because when you land an opportunity, the question will be, what have you done? Whether you are prepared to take on that opportunity or not.
Thank you so much, Prof. So the next set of questions, we are going to the institutional side. You're the global past president of CIArb, and you just left that position in 2025. That you've been able to garner so much experience from being at the helm of affairs, so administratively and also experientially, that like working in as an arbitrator. So you've seen both sides of the coin. So my first question after seeing arbitration from the institutional side, what do you think practitioners misunderstand about arbitral institutions?
So those who are not knowledgeable about institutions and their inner working may think of them as either a post box, just forwarding documents, receiving requests, very bureaucratic in that sense. But to me, a good institution is neither. The most important work that an institution does is often invisible. The paradox, of course, is that when an institution performs superbly, practitioners barely notice it. Because if you do your job very well, people do not know. They just get the work product and things are done well. They simply experience an institution that functions prominently and works well. And so my view is that the misunderstanding arises from the lack of visibility as to the inner workings of institutions. And that is a good segue, if we're going to address this, the value of staff. The best and most important asset of any institution is its staff. You hire the right people for proper case management, for proper segments of the business, because for institutions, it is a business, but of course, it's also a service, a justice-based service that needs to be delivered. But institutional staff are the most valuable asset. And institutions who have policies and institutional framework and institutional memory function much better than others.
Thank you so much, Prof. So our takeaway is basically, the staff being the most valuable asset you may have, and it's also going to segue into your best business decision and service. So our next question would be, having sat in the president's chair, what did you learn about how an arbitration institution actually works that you did not appreciate before assuming that responsibility? And why we're asking this question is because, of course, after wanting to be arbitrators, I'm sure some persons want to grow in arbitration institutions. Now, for Nigeria, CIArb UK is like the most viable institution for arbitration. We have one other that I know of, but we always look up to CIArb UK. So what were your learnings from being the president in that institution that probably you did not appreciate and probably people will not appreciate before assuming that kind of responsibility?
So yes, so as I mentioned, again, institutional staff and institutional memory are key. And no matter, even though I was a trustee at the Chartered Institute before becoming a president, and that's one of the institutions, but I've seen other institutions that are literally, because as you know, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators is not literally an arbitral institution that administers cases like the ICC, LCIA, SIAC, HKIAC, and many other institutions across the globe, including African institutions like the Cairo Regional Center, CIAC, the Lagos Center, a lot or the Lagos Court of Arbitration, or the Regional Center for International Arbitration. There are a lot of things, and all these institutions function. But to me, from the outside, as I mentioned, there are commonalities. One, you need to have policies and rules. They matter enormously, and they are actually indispensable to the functioning of any institution. But they are not the recipe to its success. This is the given. Institutions ultimately are animated by the people that take those decisions and exercise the judgment repeatedly over cases. And that brings me to the important thing. From the outside, you only get the decisions, whatever decisions given by an institution regarding appointing an arbitrator, fees, extending time limits, whatever. But from the inside, a lot of work, an ecosystem exists to manage that. And so you have case managers, counsel, committees, boards, arbitrators, administrators, and countless judgment calls that are made on a daily basis that never appear to the public or in even annual reports. You get the statistics in the annual reports, but the work that goes into that and behind the scenes is immense. There are institutions that are powerhouses. There are case managers that don't even get enough sleep because of the work there. And there are institutions, the work done by the case managers or legal counsels within those institutions is formidable. The PCA is an example, the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Their team is amazing. The ICC, the team is amazing. As I mentioned, LCIA, HKAC, CIArb, these are very prominent institutions. ICSID, of course, for investment arbitration, that leads in investment arbitration. A lot comes to mind in that sense. But what I've come to appreciate is that when it comes to institutional leadership, it is not simply about administering today's cases. It is more about setting the standards for tomorrow that others will follow to safeguard the legitimacy of arbitration and sustain the existence of that field. So in reality, these institutions are not just administering cases, they are curating trust. Trust in the whole system. The hallmark of trust is actually squarely in the hands of those institutions. That's why credible institutions offering ARC services, which, as I say, adaptive, credible, and reputable dispute resolution services, this is what I call ARC services, are key to the success of the system, its proper functioning, and inducing trust in it, and acquiring the needed legitimacy in respect of dispute resolution generally.
Thank you so much, Prof. So we're going to be segueing into, the nitty-gritty of arbitration. We have a question from, participants. One of the questions was, are arbitrations not backed by conversion to judgment of the court of competent jurisdiction legally binding on the parties to it? Are arbitrations not backed by conversion to judgment of the court of competent jurisdiction legally binding on the parties to it?
So the general rule on that, of course, you have to check the seat of arbitration and the applicable legal framework. But generally, in almost all arbitration laws that I've seen in many jurisdictions, the reality is an arbitral award is a final pronouncement of the decision of an arbitral tribunal. And so it enjoys the finality. Normally, it has a res judicata effect. Now, on paper, it enjoys that legal effect. The reality is, to get it enforced, you need that converted, you need the blessing of the court, if it's not voluntarily enforced. Because I can tell you this, in Africa, MENA region, in certain parts of Latin America, it is not uncommon that people challenge awards and you need enforcement proceedings. But in other parts, voluntary compliance is the norm. And so in reality, you will not voluntarily comply with something unless it is legally binding. So it is legally binding, no doubt about that. The question of enforcement is applying the court mechanism to give it effect in a specific territory or jurisdiction. And this is where the role of the courts regarding enforcement or the blessing or the exequatur or the order of enforcement becomes useful. But generally, in legal theory and in abstract, yes, arbitral awards are binding and have their res judicata effect.
Thank you so much. So, of course, as we're prone to have, you have laws, but the implementation of those laws are another matter. Thank you so much, Prof. So, the next question is on, it says, is a legal arbitration process held in England executory in Nigeria or enforceable? So is any legal arbitration process held in another country, say England, is it executory in Nigeria or is it enforceable?
So my understanding of the question is that we're talking about arbitration in England. So assume it is London. So London is the seat of arbitration, which means generally the English Arbitration Act is applicable. Now, once that award is rendered, it is final and binding on the parties. You need to get that award enforced in Nigeria. So this means
Yes.
that you need to look into the Nigerian Act regarding enforcement, and you've got better lawyers that need to advise on Nigerian law. But there are, of course, like any other jurisdiction, you've got the New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards, which applies, and it includes Article 5, which lists the grounds on which you may refuse recognition and enforcement in that sense. And that, I think, is part of Nigerian law. And you have got the Nigerian law and the mechanisms about the procedure of applying for enforcement. So there are grounds. Normally, these grounds do not go to the merits of the tribunal's findings unless you're looking at substantive public policy. But beyond that narrow realm of public policy, all the grounds relate either to procedure, constitution of the tribunal, and whether the tribunal has exceeded its jurisdiction, whether an arbitration agreement exists or has expired or is inoperative. All these questions across all jurisdictions, courts grapple with, and you've got the New York Convention guide on the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. And that guide is issued by institutions like ICA, which is the International Council for Commercial Arbitration, that has that guide on the applicability of the New York Convention in many languages to enable courts in various jurisdictions to align themselves with best practices regarding enforcement of foreign arbitral awards.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. One other question with regards to the nitty-gritty of arbitration is on our chat we're seeing a question on, is arbitration appealable if the parties are dissatisfied with the outcome?
So people have different views. Normally in arbitration, you will at least have one party dissatisfied with the outcome or unhappy.
Yeah.
Now, that party may be unhappy because that party lost the case. But I think reading things objectively and looking at the decision, if the tribunal provided sufficient and adequate and objective and compelling reasoning, one can understand and accept why that party lost. And that's why I say, normally in reasoning, you explain to the losing party why that party has lost. And that is part of the legitimacy and credibility the system has enjoyed, because transparently the reasoning is there. Now, it might be the case that both parties are unhappy with the award. Now, here people have different views. Some arbitrators think that the mark of a good award is that both parties are not satisfied. I do not necessarily agree. There are cases where both parties being dissatisfied is simply a function of them not getting either the proper advice or the proper prosecution of their case, or counsel is not competent enough, skilled enough, or maybe the case itself is not good enough, and that's why both parties may not be satisfied. But there are situations where parties may have on both sides exaggerated their claims, made unsubstantiated claims, that the tribunal find itself compelled to reject both cases. Where that happens, that I think is a testament to the proper functioning of the system and adherence to best practices in terms of a party bearing the burden of establishing its case. So the idea of dissatisfaction by a party is not in and of itself telling of whether arbitration is properly functioning. It is certainly something to take into consideration, to address, to probe, to investigate, but not necessarily a causation as to the improper functioning of the system. Because as I mentioned, in any decision making, whether arbitration or judiciary or elsewhere, dissatisfaction is just part of the process.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think you made a very important point, because when parties are not satisfied, the first thing they will look at is the or the arbitration proceedings itself was not done in the right manner. However, you've been able to, explain and widen our horizons, thinking, think outside that. It may be the council, maybe they did not give them right information or whatever it is. And I think that's one takeaway that everyone should have going out from this meeting, that dissatisfaction by both parties is not necessarily about the arbitration itself. There may be other causes to it. So, Professor, we would like to know, we're young lawyers or we are young arbitrators, and we know that we are now in the age of AI, digital skills, digital technology and all that. And so my question to you, from your point of view as a very experienced and excellent arbitrator, what skills do you think that the next generation of arbitrators need that today's practitioners may not possess?
I can simply boil down this to this: interdisciplinary knowledge. You can no longer expect a lawyer just to be confined to the four corners of the law. Interdisciplinary knowledge is important. Legal excellence will remain indispensable, but insufficient. They will need technological literacy beyond the traditional understanding of lawyers. I'm not saying that you're expected to be a coder, for example, but you need to have enough understanding to interrogate AI-generated work, algorithmic evidence, understand cybersecurity issues, digitalization of processes, and how this is done intelligently. So you will need data literacy, no doubt, financial literacy, and greater and better scientific literacy in a way. And remember effectively that as technology becomes more powerful, distinctly human capabilities will become more and more valuable because of potentially human wisdom, judgment, for good or for worse, empathy, cultural intelligence and understanding, moral courage, in a way, and the ability to distinguish what can be automated from what must remain human. And one thing for the younger generation, you are no longer competing with your human peers. You're competing with AI. And so you need to bring to the table skills, judgment, understanding, knowledge that AI, either in its present state of affairs or status quo, or in its future better prospects of a more reliable AI system, you as a human still withstand the test of time and present yourself as a useful decision maker or contributor to the dispute resolution process. If you become completely reliant on AI, there is no value for you, and you actually lose your place in the food chain.
Thank you so much, Professor. So I'm really smiling about what you said, because I know when I started, trying to work around technology law and then segueing into data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, I was being looked at like, what's this girl doing? But now I'm so happy that it's a skill that you must have to be a successful arbitrator in the next generation. So I'm hoping that, but not just young arbitrators, so both young arbitrators and experienced arbitrators, try to start finding time to expand their practice to accommodate cybersecurity, AI modeling, threats, privacy in its sense that you can be able to, give serious knowledge or advice on that instance. We'll be rounding off soon. So our round of questions would be, one of them is, what is the biggest opportunity and threat for arbitration in Africa?
That's
So
an
both.
excellent point.
Yes.
So opportunity, risks, or threats, to me, they are intriguingly connected. The opportunity, of course, for Africa is the scale and the resources. Africa is huge. We've got both the human resources and natural resources, which many have vested interest in, of course. Now, the threat, of course, to me is clear: the lack of institutionalization and insufficient capacity building. And that applies across the board, whether in arbitration or in many other fields. You will find talented professionals, practitioners, players leaving the continent because of the lack of institutional framework, resources, and they go elsewhere and they become brilliant and shining stars. Now, I think the test for the continent is how you can keep and nurture that talent, institutionalize the framework of breeding talented practitioners that can practice on the continent or related to the continent's work, and to a large extent, managing your resources, both human and natural resources, properly and efficiently. So scale and resources are our high points, and at the same time, institutionalization and proper management of these resources is actually the greatest risk and threat.
Thank you so much, Prof. So I'm going through the chats and I'm seeing questions on, fees to the institution for young lawyers. And I think this is really a challenge for us because of the exchange rate. And I don't know whether I would want you to answer this question on fees and how we can work around it. Do you think it's a question that you're able to answer right now?
Up to you entirely. Can you just tell me the question, because I can't see the chat? So what is the question in relation to fees?
That's right. So the questions are basically related to the fees, not necessarily saying they're exorbitant, but because of the exchange rate and the financial situations of young arbitrators, it's not something that is very easy for young arbitrators to pay, and then paying it yearly, and then paying it in a foreign currency. So that's basically the question.
Okay, so we're
How
talking
do
about
we
fees.
navigate, the financial? Yes,
Is it the fees of
yes, the fees.
organizations that they are part of, for example?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so consider
Fees
this.
of the CIArb,
Exactly.
part
So
of
let
it,
me tell
yes.
you this. I'm not alien to that. I was young at a time, and of course, again, in my country, currency exchange, and is the rate has changed and it's become the dollar value is much higher. What the CIArb and many other institutions do is that they take into consideration when setting the fees, effectively the economic situation in certain jurisdictions. And sometimes when situations happen, if there is armed conflicts, wars, pandemics, or whatever, there is further reductions or suspensions, whatever. As a young practitioner, I personally face that. I'm earning that salary, perhaps even equivalent or a large portion to it would be the annual fee that I have to pay. And let me tell you this. First of all, for students, the CIArb for students does not charge fees. But if you are a professional and you want to become part of a professional community, there is an investment you have to make. And the investment is not just in your own skills, which you do by going to do your master's, by doing further studies. You go to a course, you pay for it. You go to a training, you pay for it. You may find some scholarships, that's understood. But in reality, it is part of the investment that you make. And so that fee is part of the investment, the commitment, showing seriousness of purpose, having access to the facilities, the services, the networking, the events, the collegiality, the products offered by like the publications of the CIArb. All this has a price, and it's simply a price to cover these costs. And remember that by making that investment, should you wish to make it, it is certainly a rewarding one.
Okay, Professor, we hear you. It's a rewarding investment. It's a rewarding investment to make. Professor, I know earlier in our chat we talked about discipline, passion. Also, after your first appointment or during your first appointment is not the time to show off. But so the next question is in that manner, in that light. Do we sometimes tell young lawyers that hard work is enough, when in reality, access, networks, and visibility matter enormously, knowing that, one of the things you get, or one of the benefits you get as being part of any institution, is that visibility, that networking opportunities. So really, is hard work just it, or in reality, access, networks, and visibility matter enormously?
So let me tell you, I'll answer this in two ways. One, for me, what has worked for me was completely hard work. I only became visible on the international arena when I decided to do that, when I have amassed knowledge sufficient that when you speak, you have something new to contribute to. For example, let me give you this. When I was president of the CIArb, I gave about 106 speeches in a year, including many keynotes. I have not repeated one. So if you've got the substantive knowledge or something to share, rather than repeating it is useful. So that's me, but that's also my character. To answer the question, hard work is indispensable. There are no shortcuts to success without hard work. But merit does not operate in a vacuum, to be fair. So you need that talent to be given an opportunity. An opportunity frequently depends on visibility, and visibility is influenced by networks. And networks are shaped by geography, education, language, economics, the ability to travel and be visible, and sometimes even privilege. But the conclusion effectively is not intended to be either a paradox or cynicism. The answer is democratizing access, mentoring beyond familiar circles. And I think today for the younger generation, something that was not easily available at my time, you can only become visible if you travel physically. Now you've got online access to various platforms, various social media, which I advise the younger generation to use very wisely, because whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you put there will haunt you and remain there for life. Even if you delete it, it is somewhere there. Someone will have taken a copy of it. So just be careful. To the young lawyers, I would say you may network, but never become transactional or bail on hard work. And to the senior practitioners, I would say, if we complain that the next generation lack the experience, the expertise, while repeatedly appointing a clique of handful of people that already have the experience, then the problem is us, not the next generation, because we have not contributed to them gaining the experience, the expertise they need to gain. So, and opportunities need to be given in that sense. And that brings me to the point of effectively remembering that one of the things that younger generation I see, because I also teach at the university, there is a very high sense of entitlement. And with entitlement asks always to be noticed. But excellence becomes impossible to ignore. And for me, I would prefer the younger generation to bear in mind working on honing your skills to become excellent, so that it becomes difficult to ignore you. It becomes effectively subjective and lack of objective not to give you an opportunity. And that is, I think, extremely important, because if you become excellent, that in itself, the recognition that you need not seek, which will arrive in a way. And again, ambition is good, but be careful not to be consumed by that ambition in itself. Be useful. If you become useful and reliable, people will want to work with you, will want to hire you. But if you just present your idea as, I'm a person only relying on my public speaking, my networking, you will get an opportunity, but you will not land a career. A career is based on the quality of work that you do. Opportunity can get you there once, twice, networking, but it's all up to you then, if you've got what it takes to succeed, and that is excellence in hard work.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think you've made so much salient points on this. Entitlement being asking to be noticed, while excellence is being difficult to be ignored. I think these are really good takeaways for us as young ones, because it's still the central theme of everything you've been saying, where hard work and passion pays, and then don't be in a hurry to arrive. I think it's one of the things that we need to know as young arbitrators, that there are opportunities that will come, but we also need to develop ourselves and become excellent. So one final question before the final question is, what is one uncomfortable truth about arbitration that you think the profession needs to confront?
I have in mind two: chauvinism and transactionality. Let me tell you this: chauvinism. This field, uh, people, and there's always big egos. People feel very and think very highly of themselves and stuff. I think the more knowledgeable a person becomes, the more humble they are, and the more
Humble.
knowledgeable, and they know that there is a lot more to learn. So chauvinism is something that plagues the field, and I think that might be visible to many. But the additional thing, transactionality. In time, when you've made it and you're working and stuff, and you've got the economics and finances, and you've got obligations to attend to and whatever, never lose sight that this is a service. It is not a free service, that is true, but ultimately a service, and it is private justice. So you're not doing this purely as a business. It is a service that serves justice in that sense.
Thank you so much, Prof. So we need to look out for chauvinism and transactionality in our daily, work in arbitration. So, Professor, what will be your parting thoughts for us? We are closing now. So, what's the one thing that probably I've not asked you, but you want us to, take away as advice that we can actually practicalize?
So for the younger generation, my advice is this: you don't need to work too hard to be impressive. If you make yourself useful, that is perfectly the thing that people look for. If you're useful, that is great. And I think asking for advice rather than opportunities will land you the opportunities that you need. And then the greatest networking technique that you can apply, and that's a recipe for success, is your hard work and excellent work. Contacts, as we mentioned, may introduce you, but credibility will recommend you. The other thing I would say to our colleagues, brothers and sisters in Africa, never borrow others' identity. Do not lose your identity. You can become cosmopolitan. You can become an absolute world-class practitioner with your identity being visible, not purely wedded, walled in, close-minded on it. Not absolutely not. Being cosmopolitan, outgoing, understanding, but also being proud of your roots in that sense. These are my few thoughts that I would say may help in your journey to excellence.
Thank you so much, Prof. Hard excellent work, asking for advice, making ourselves useful. Credibility will always recommend us, and never lose your identity as an African, never lose your identity as a Nigerian. Thank you so much, Prof. I would like to, before we just go, if Dr. Agbelusi is on the call, if you can just say a vote of thanks to our very dear own Professor Dr. Mohamed Abdel Wahab before we close. Just a minute. Dr. Agbelusi, are you on the call? Oh, hi, Kazi from India. Thank you so much for attending. Okay, I'm not seeing Dr. Agbelusi. I think he's maybe network. So let me just do the vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Professor Doctor. We called and you answered us. It was, okay, he's here. Dr. Agbelusi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. Fantastic having
Pleasure
you.
seeing you. How are you, my friend?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good. So thank you so much for sharing with all our YMG members and the young lawyers. It's been fantastic just getting your journey and tips to help them along their way. And I hope that they will take to heart many of the things that you've shared. And we really appreciate you for taking this time to be with us.
I'm
On behalf
grateful
of
for the kind
yeah,
invitation, I
yeah,
must say,
Nigeria.
truly. And to me, I'm the one who's thankful. What keeps me going is these bright young generation full of passion, hope, and positivism that I think we need. It is the fuel that keeps me going. So I'm very grateful for the invitation. And whenever something like this comes up, I do not think twice.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adana. Been a wonderful moderator. Thank you, Abisoye, and all the YMG. Wish you all a lovely afternoon.
Thank you so much. Please, we'll send the recordings to everyone once it's ready. Bye for now.